technical.
Excellent.
Rennie's saying he was going to be here. Did you get a message from him at all?
Yes.
Andrew?
No, what did I just say? So my leg falls off.
I hate when that happens.
I know, it's terrible.
And you misplace it.
And I go.
Say that again. How are you? Trying to talk on
We got our haircut.
I know, we so respected. On the outside.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Joe.
I'm Michelle.
Mike, I thought I was sitting in for you.
Not this week, next week, maybe. Next week, I absolutely will not be at the first meeting.
Good evening.
You need doctor work done?
No, this is the first.
I did my usual thing, I didn't bring a pen.
No, keep one in your desk. That's a,
Where?
in your desk.
Don't forget to check.
You keep one in your desk drawer.
Look, I'm not consciously, but I had way too much of
Maybe Doug left you one.
that.
As soon as Carl returns, we will start.
I left my pen at my desk,
For this meeting.
and then I took it home the last time I forgot to bring a pen.
I feel like all I've been doing all week is giving out pens. They around me. But it's over here. I don't know if
Between
I-
the car and here, I actually misplaced mine.
Pink highlighter.
Who needs a pen?
My last.
I need one prepared.
Oh yeah, I do have another one. Carl needs one. Can I get these back?
Sure not.
It's not that big of a deal, except I just want to be prepared tomorrow.
I'm gonna insert password to the.
Oh, I have a whole bunch.
You should be able to just connect.
Yeah, your left, oh, is that the?
It's the first. It's
No,
the first.
I threw the wrong computer.
All right, I'm filling in for Carl.
Well, Carl's here.
Carl's here.
I have an email here that said he was.
I mean, you're welcome to stay, but
Yeah, no.
everyone's here.
I mean, depending on how long we go, I may have to leave.
So these only 6, right?
We have the order.
I have the full. Yeah.
Yeah, everything else, we didn't leave early.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Good evening. Hi. All right, so welcome to our Laws and Rules Committee meeting. It is 6:36 and we're going to go ahead and open up. We have the full committee here for Laws and Rules. And we also have Alderwoman Michelle Hurst attending virtually. We have Lisa Tenti, our clerk, Barbara Graves Fowler, our corporation counsel, and our council president, Andrew Shaw. All right, everybody have an agenda?
Oh, you do have a spare time that I looked at.
All right, first item on the agenda is the Public Safety Strategic Action Plan. And although Mayor Noble is listed, I don't see him in here.
I'm sure that they can present.
You think?
I mean, I can also answer questions.
Okay, good. So we have Lester Strong here. What did we call you? Project manager, consultant?
Project manager, project coordinator.
Okay, project coordinator. And Ed Lawson is also attending with them. So you guys are welcome to come up to the table and talk to us about this.
For the benefit of folks on the screen, can I stand
Sure.
here? Is that okay?
Yeah.
That way I can take this off.
Yeah,
I think we can manage the 6 feet distance issue. So I can move down a little bit. How's that? Can everybody see you? Great. Thank you for allowing allowing us to come. First of all, let me introduce you to Ed Lawson, who was my partner in creating the strategic plan for the city. In addition, he is a professor at SUNY New Paltz. He's a colleague of the Honorable Rain. And he's also the executive director of a program called FACES. Let me make sure I get it right. Families and Communities
Engagement services.
Engagement Services. Thank you. So he's been an extraordinary partner in this whole process. I'm really happy he could make it tonight. The person who's absent, who will be back though, is Ev Mann, whom many of you know. Ev is working with us regarding the Peaceful Guardians Project. He really is on the ground here, managing the activities here in the city of Kingston. So that's why all of us are here tonight. Again, we're tremendously grateful that you've invited us to be a part of this tonight. As an overview, let me say that this plan, our intention for this plan, first and foremost, is to help us draw a distinction between law enforcement and public safety. They're related, but they have distinct roles, in our humble opinion. Law enforcement has a very, very discrete set of rules, regulations that it's compelled to live by. Public safety is about ensuring that the entire community feels both seen and safe. That's really its role. And in order for that to happen, it's again our recommendation that community has to be more engaged in the process of public safety without diminishing anything that law enforcement is really charged to do. Ev and I teach facilitate a workshop called Quality of Life. And in that workshop, there's a piece that we really stress at the beginning of our workshop. And that piece is about that science tells us that no living thing can live in isolation. Whether it's water, air, plant, animal, human, nothing can live by itself. It must actually be engaged with other elements in the environment. And it also has to be a giving and receiving relationship. And that's how we thrive. Well, in the same way, it's critically important in our view that there be this fluid, ongoing, wonderful, dynamic relationship with government and law enforcement and the community. And what we've attempted to do in our strategic plan is to really offer a way in which we believe we can make that. Our plan really stipulates about 6 initiatives that we're recommending, but we're recommending in the first year that the council gives serious consideration to 4. Those 4 are, number 1, community engagement for the very reasons that I just shared with you. We think it's critically important to build that kind of dynamic infrastructure between community, city government, and law enforcement. Second is youth development. I don't need to tell you all of the data, all of the reports that have come out regarding our young people and what's happening with our young people because of the pandemic. How much emotional trauma they've experienced, how much they've lost developmentally in terms of academics, and social emotional engagement that they've lost, and also an increase in violence and aggression and disrespect and disregard. We were just reading a Washington Post article on this very thing today. So in terms of public safety, we think that really creating a framework in support of young people in the city of Kingston is going to be critical, and we can talk in more detail about that. Third is healthy relationships. This is a piece that we explored very deeply with the county, with David Clegg and his associates about domestic violence and other attendant problems that are related to that. But that there are really homegrown answers to that issue and to that question. And finally, we think it's critically important that we look at mental health. That in terms of homelessness, in terms of drug addiction, in terms of autism, there's a range of mental health issues that I think law enforcement officers would be the first to tell you often clash with the performance of their jobs and not fully being trained to engage with these kind of very, very unique and special situations. So we wanted to, again, we believe we have identified a way in which we can begin to, from both a organizational and a community-based perspective, really begin to deal with that. So those are the 4 priorities that we would list for year 1. The one other thing that we would highlight is accountability. We think that at the heart of what we are doing as a city and as a council, it is really important that our citizens really see and trust what we are doing, and that we can, through clear measurement, be able to demonstrate that we're making progress, that we really are being able to move in a way that we are bringing our city and our community, the communities in our city, together in a real way and in a powerful way. So that's kind of the big picture of what the strategic plan offers. There's a lot of detail in there, but I think that's kind of an overview. So I'll stop there. I should ask Ed to offer some insight into the measurement portion of our work, because again, in our view, it's going to be a critical dimension of what we do in order to inspire both trust and engagement in the work that we do. Ed?
Again, thank you for having us, and thank you for this opportunity to do this great work with you. Wanted to just add one other thing. Lester mentioned mental health. I wanted to add with the dynamic of mental health, that there's a co-concurrent substance use disorder that usually couples it. And so part of when we talk about mental health, we understand that mental health sometimes causes people to self-medicate. And so when we were talking about it, we were talking about it in terms of the holistic space of mental health and co-concurrency. I wanted to also just add, as Lester listed before, strategic priorities that we have. The way I approach this work is through 3 proverbs, African proverbs. And I think they make sense, and I think it's worth noting as substance before I get into sort of performance measures that are really critical to this. The first proverb is one that is well known, but it's probably, many people don't know it's misquoted. It says it takes a village to raise a child. The actual African proverb says it takes a whole village to raise a child. And that's important for a couple of reasons that Lester's already talked about. It takes all of us, but it takes all of us showing up in our whole selves. It takes all of us being ready to contribute and get in where we fit in. And it's important that we understand that this work was a labor of love, but it has a public health sort of perspective to it. And it's designed for us to work collaboratively together to solve it. The second African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's the notion that this work, again, is going to be done collaboratively, it's going to be done collectively, it's going to be done by every member of the community collectively being involved in it. So you hear a lot of principles around restorative practice and restorative circles in what we've laid out in the strategic action plan. The final proverb, African proverb, speaks to sometimes the difficult nature of this work. Sometimes we don't see eye to eye with folk, sometimes we don't understand folk. And this proverb says, for the sake of the rose, the thorn must be watered too. And it's a notion that if we want to receive that mosaic, if we want to enjoy the beauty of the rose, we understand that we might get pricked, that it might not be as easy as we anticipated, but in order to experience that rose, we need to water the thorn as well. Turning toward what Lester asked me to step up before, I apologize. Just need to say that. The performance measure. So what we realized, and a lot of my work around the country, when we talk about community engagement, folks may not be so trusting of other systems and structures. And so a large part of what we need to do and try to do is engage in targeted community conversations, not necessarily town halls, because those have the tendency for people to be right instead of get to the reconcile or resolution. So we took the approach of listening and learning and understanding what root cause problems were. And over we hear on a consistent level that people want to be able to trust, and we need to build legitimacy. And one way that we understand how to do that work is building in performance measures and to continuously look at the steps that we've taken or the strategic goals that we've laid out and test them. And so as a part of the strategic action plan that you received, you would have seen that we listed performance measures and outcomes so that as we're going and implementing what we believe are evidence-based practices, we want to make sure that we are constantly evaluating this to make sure that they're achieving the strategic goals that we laid out. So it was really important for us to do that because we are still trying to build trust and legitimacy. And even in the process of implementing the program, we're doing that. Our approach to evidence-based programs are not just relying on the evidence-based nature of a best practice. There's 3 other E's that we look for. We look for effective implementation, because a great plan without being effectively implemented is not a really good plan. Secondly, we need enabling context, which the city has given us. They've given us the opportunity to share how we might be able to implement this program. And so the final E is evaluation, which is what I just shared. And when we think of evaluation, it's not something that we implement in day 1 of year 1, and we revisit it 20 months later. We're talking about a continuous quality improvement type of evaluation. We're going to consistently look at what we said, what we did, what we understood to see if we are actually with fidelity achieving the goals that we wanted to get at. So it's the progress monitoring. I'm really excited about what we've been able to accomplish. It was a labor of love getting to know both the city council and the community and working with Lester and Ev. And I hope that we can talk more further about it. Any questions that you might have, we would love to be able to sort of answer them and get you and ease any concerns that you might have about how we might be able to implement this strategic action plan. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Did you want to say anything?
No, I'm just here.
Yeah, we'll open it up for any questions.
Well, I have a number of comments. I'll start with thank you for the work. This is really exciting. Your reputation's preceding you. That's a great thing. Just for starters, and I have more to say later, what are the other 2 pieces of the program that you're not planning to do in year 1, but are planning to do subsequently?
Training and media. Although media will be folded into the community engagement work, because again, we're going to have to really connect with people in an important way. But in terms of a full onslaught of just media, probably not the highest priority. We think that promoting that which we're doing and really demonstrating its efficacy is more important.
The other, I think if I say this, then I'll pass the floor on to other people. I'm a communication professional, a writer and a communicator, and I think about communication all the time. And what I notice is that people don't know how to talk to each other in a way that resolves conflict. They get stuck into negativity and hostility. And there's also all kinds of non-communication that happens between class and ethnicity and so on and so forth. And any public safety program has to take the heat down of off the conflict and adversariality that dominates discourse both in person and in social media. So I have been studying something called, you probably know, nonviolent communication for many years. I try to practice it.
Michael Rosenberg.
Right, Marshall. Yeah, and I mean, it literally changed my life and saved my marriage. Right, I mean, it's a fabulous thing. There are also some people in town who I want to point you to, and you may know them, called the Culture Shift Institute. And they organize, they're new in town, they've been here about maybe 6 months, 9 months. And they organize dialogues between people in structured ways that help people get to the heart of their humanity with each other, rather than getting stuck in ideological adversariality. And I know these people, I haven't seen their work because I'm sort of housebound because of COVID, but I've heard great things about it. So I would really encourage you to get in touch with Martha Williams and John Schillapod.
What's the name of that culture?
It's called Culture Shift Agency, .com, and they have something called Break Bread Dinners or something on Wheels or something. But talk to them, I can give you their contact information, and they're in Kingston and they're just getting their settled, and this is the work they want to do.
That's great.
It's called Culture Shift.
The names of the individuals.
Martha Williams and her partner is named John, I don't know how to pronounce it, Scilipotee. I pronounce it Schillapod. Okay, so that was the piece of excellent. Thanks, Amy.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Great presentation. Yeah, it's like those intersection of the different public safety and education and community involvement and all of that. That's great. I want to ask, because when I was reading this earlier, don't we already have a cahoots? Didn't we already give funding to a mental health team with, what's the special unit that we have funded?
You mean in the fire department?
Yeah, part of the fire department, is there gonna be like a social worker? And
Yeah.
it seemed to me that was sort of a,
Global mental health unit.
similar to one of the parts of this, not?
I do remember when Mayor first sent the draft to us, he did mention in his communication that the mental health aspect of the plan is already in the works. So I'm not sure, I'm assuming that you haven't talked to him about that yet. Okay, so that,
Yeah, 'cause this came out in March.
that would be like timeframe for the second piece of implementation, collaborate with multiple individuals and organizations to create 24-hour health and wellness emergency response system. I mean, that seems.
It's similar.
yeah, so what we had
If it's
discussed.
being done, it's wonderful.
But
Yeah.
I mean, but it probably could use more, embellishment, maybe a little bit, but you should look at what's being planned, but, what else can I say? I just want to ask this, because when I read nonviolent, communications, the increase of violence, COVID, but not much about what's happening in our country and what has escalated in terms of hate, et cetera. So that's just kind of with me a lot,
Inconsistent. It's true. And one of our mandates, clear mandates, was to make sure that what we offered really was about what is transpiring locally. We always had an eye toward what the national dynamic was, but our charge was to translate that national kind of activity swirl to what does it mean here in Kingston. So
Yeah,
We,
I mean,
we
you mentioned
totally took that into
George Floyd
consideration.
and that whole.
Absolutely. Well, George Floyd started it all.
Yes, but yes, and there's other parts.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I'll say that. And then I wanted to say, what, are there certain neighborhoods that you're thinking of or clusters in Kingston or just one area? Because I know each of our wards, for instance, are a bit different, you know, and then,
I would come back to the council and say, to the council, where do you see the need? In other words, there are communities where the level of law enforcement engagement is higher. There are levels, there are certain communities where the level of mistrust is higher. So if those are the criteria, if what we're attempting to do is to build bridges, then we have to look at where the greatest need is and certainly start.
and another question I have, because about 25 years ago, I ran this initiative in Ulster County. It was Ulster County Community Asset Builders. And it was like a planning initiative for all Ulster County youth and families. And it was based on assets, you know, those Asset Search Institute.
Yeah.
And Family Woodstock had their own, of course, that would be Family Woodstock. But, so each community, you know, had to go to Woodstock, Ellenville, New Paltz, Kingston, each one had a totally different culture and how to engage. So I hear you saying that you're going to enter into those natural networks. Now I forget what I was bringing up. Oh, parents and families, quote unquote family, right? So you may be addressing youth or, like, what's the family unit, the extended unit, like, that's often sometimes, well, kids learn from their parents and it was like engaging.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that.
Well, you're again.
It's not really a question.
It is a
question.
and my answer is amen. Again, it's again the isolation. In other words, you can't simply function in isolation. In other words, if we're going to really look at the child or the youth, then we have to look at the whole youth and all of the things that are surrounding that child, that are impacting. Doesn't mean that we're going to be able to do everything, but it certainly needs to be a consideration, whatever, to design whatever it is that we design. We did a Peaceful Guardians program where we were bringing middle school students to a Saturday program. And it became very clear that unless we went and picked them up, we weren't going to make it, simply because some parents didn't have cars, or some parents had to work on the weekends, or any number of things. So that has to be a consideration for whatever we create. I think it's true. I think you're exactly right.
I'd like to add too, throughout this process and even as we move forward and implement the program, we have to hold space for inquiry. Understand at a deep level what the root causes of the problem. So we identify issues and say, this is what's happening. But oftentimes we never take the step back and say, well, why is it happening? And how can we introduce an intervention that might address it? And so what we've done very methodically in this process is to continue to approach it with that space. We started there, and then also will continue there, because as you mentioned, different communities are going to come with different situations. And we don't want to make sure a cookie cutter plan in place, which is why we said not just the evidence-based practice, but the effective implementation of the evidence-based practice. And then the evaluation is to say, well, did we get it right? And looking at it on a continuous basis.
Yes.
What's the plan for starting this? In terms of, like, are you just going to start, I mean, I see the plan, but are you just gonna start it? Or are you gonna go out and discuss with public? I mean, what are you asking? And yeah, I know Rennie has something to say about this. I'm curious to start that
Sure.
conversation.
Do you want? jump in first, Ron?
Well, I think this is a really crucial question because, you know, we have lots of different groups in town and don't necessarily see eye to eye. And the best laid plan is not going to work if people don't actually get engaged. And so I've been talking to a number of political scientists and other community activists about this concept of citizen assemblies. And so I met with the mayor yesterday to discuss it. He's open to the idea. So I'd like to sit down with you all and talk about this as a possibility for the first step. And it's a process whereby you, through a sort of randomized process, you bring citizens in, and it's not the usual suspects. You know, we know in Kingston, there's like 150 people. You know, pretty much anything that happens, one of them is going to show up. And
I think I have a little speed dial.
yeah, right? So unfortunately, mine only goes to 125. But anyway, so the idea is that you'll be bringing in basically folks who are living their everyday lives. And because it's not just completely random, there's a whole process. But you're going to bring in people that really represent different parts of the community. And so one possibility would be to have them come together through this process, look at the program, and in a sense, evaluate it as members of the community to give you feedback, but also to make it palatable, if you will, to the larger community, so that it doesn't seem to be coming from this faction or that faction, or aimed at that faction or that faction.
That makes great sense.
So, but I mean, I'd like to sit down with these folks, and there are folks in the area, and so maybe we could sit down sometime soon and talk and think about that as a process for rolling it out and making it happen.
It makes great sense, and it really dovetails beautifully with what we were thinking, which was that what we would do is to essentially create an RFP for the 4 areas that we've identified. And then we would ask certain organizations in the community to give us a plan and to give us a budget. All right. So that we would have a sense of where they were going. But before each one of those individual groups started writing the plan, that I think the kind of thing that you were suggesting is exactly what they need to do. In other words, they need to hear from the community about where their concerns are in this specific area. So this is the kind of targeted kind of feedback and conversation that Ed was talking about. So that then what they're building is building something that is based on what we're hearing in the community, rather than some idea back here of what we think it should be. So I think we're thinking this.
Great. Okay. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. I mean, you guys do it. No.
And we'll cheer you on. Anita, can I just,
Say, well, we don't actually do it.
Well.
I just want to add one last comment, which is sort of a sidebar, but you all probably saw an email that came in today bemoaning the nature of the discourse online about pedestrian safety and bikes and stuff. And it was basically saying that the city, it gets so hostile and icky in social media that the city should either stop having comments or moderate them. And I think that social media, I don't know to what extent you can have a presence or influence as an organization on how people handle social media, but to the extent that it's possible and to sort of impose rules of civility, I think that's an important piece of it that I encourage the city government to look at.
Social media has got to be part of our view. It's how we breathe these days, so it's got to be a part of the equation.
I guess I mentioned sort of public marketing campaign. So things like that council does at a high level that just begin to change the narrative of the conversation. That's the kind of thing. And again, that was the down the line, but yeah, those are the types of things that we can do. That where you engage the community in a conversation, sort of refocus.
And
the guys.
And I think this is the sort of thing where you can't, it's really hard to do this on a grand scale. It has to start locally. This is where it takes a whole village. And this is of a scale that we could actually start to make a difference, especially young people who don't know anybody, literally don't know.
There's a business practice that says, sorry, you know, the warlike imagery, but it says bullets before cannons. In other words, you create a small pilot project, you look at it, you design it, you beta test it to make sure that it's really achieving what you wanted to achieve.
I think you bullet tested.
You bullet test it, there you go. And then you begin to scale it, then you begin to expand it out. But year one, I think it's really important for the council to understand that year one is going to be about that. It's going to be about these small, very deliberate conversations and planning and beta testing ideas. It's not going to be this grand, it's not going to be this completely evolved idea. It has to grow and germinate. And we have to be deliberate about it to ensure that every brick that we're laying is solidly placed so that we can grow.
Let me, before I come to you, let me just say it. Michelle, did you have anything that you wanted to say before we go a second time around the table?
Sure, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for being here. I actually work in the mental health field and work with families here in Kingston. I have been for 8 years. So I was curious, and just reading the plan that was in the agenda about the peer advocates and your discussion earlier about our youth. Are you going to have peer advocates responding for mental health crisis, like for youth peer advocates, or would you have adult peer advocates responding at that time?
We think, again, our big consultant on this was David McNamara with Samadhi. And his very strong recommendation was that there be peer advocates and peer counselors because they've been through the experience and they understand what's going on. This is Lester now talking, and I'm talking not from our plan, but from the sense of it. And I think that, I think it makes sense to have youth peer counselors and advisors. The answer would be yes, because I think they see each other and they connect with each other much more readily than we as adults do.
Right, so there are mental health youth peer advocates that are aged 18 to 30 that are credentialed in the state. And then like in New York City, they have crisis response teams for children that they have a mental health worker go out then with a family peer advocate on every team. And then they engage with the parent to connect them with services in the community.
Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense.
Thank you.
Barbara?
Yeah, so it's, the question I have is sort of, you know, I saw David's name on your materials and I'm a fan. There's also the police and, you know, different, so it made me think of those as I was reading it, what's the mosaic of little programs that are already in place that are this kind of the same goal of some sort. So that's what, you know, it's almost like want to see like a matrix or a something, you know, say, you know, hey, before we do that, you know, let's do that.
Yeah.
But you have great people. I mean, so, you know what I'm saying?
Again, you're spot on. And if you look at the column that has potential in potential organizations with which we can really engage, it speaks to that very point. It is to develop some level of consistency and coherence among those organizations so that we're not working against each other, or we're not working in silos in ways that could be counterproductive. So your points will.
So that's part of the work, part of the engagement, part of the money that we would spend on this is to do that.
That's
create that. Okay.
I just want to add too, we're taking a public health approach, a
Yeah.
holistic approach. And so what that means is that sometimes people in their silos get really excited and passionate about their silos and move forward without that coordination. And if the goal is health and wellness or well-being in a community, we need to do that work that you and Leslie just talked about. It needs to be cohesive, it needs to be collective. And while someone is passionate about mental health here, someone might be equally as passionate about youth development and engagement, creating resources, access to resources, opportunities. And that's how we get healthy and well as a community, as a mosaic.
I'm a public health administration person.
That's what I said.
I want a pin though. I want a pin now,
Andrea?
in advance.
Mine wasn't important enough for me to write it down, so I forgot.
Okay.
There, it's a pin.
Okay, well, I mean, fantastic, that's all I can say, that's the word that I can use. This is just an extension of the 2020 re-envisioning public safety plan that you formulated, and which I found working, because we already have a nice, that not a perfect one, but a good working relationship with law enforcement. Since then, there's been numerous meetings and monthly meetings between law enforcement. The bike plan has been established. We see officers out on bikes now. We see them engaging with the public and talking to them. So it's great. And I really think that it was a result of the re-envisioning public safety plan. And so I think that this is, I can't wait for this to be implemented. I think it's going to work. And I think you did a good job. Thank you for all of your hard work, diligence. And I'm thinking with community engagement as the first initiative on here. So this is not going to be the way that you did it before with the re-envisioning public, where you got a group of people, kind of like focus groups together. No, we're not going to.
We've done that.
Right, so we don't need to do that, go that route.
Although, now that we have created a framework, to your point, Brent, what we now want to say is, in this framework, what really is important to you in community X or community Y, so that we can build a plan that is consistent with what are the perceived needs of that community.
Right.
Yep.
This is another way to say thank you. I was actually up in Albany Law today at law school, and we spent the whole day talking about implicit bias, and it was a really rough day for us. And we, a lot of us were talking in between sessions, and a lot of us were feeling a little defeated. And I got to tell, saying nothing ever happened. So I got to tell them a little bit about this meeting and that we were going to hear this strategy. And so you got a little pep in the step to some law students today, just from knowing that, there is a community out there that is moving forward with the plan to actually do something instead of these sessions. So you're sure not to feel tired law students today.
I gotta say, you guys need to pat yourselves on the back a little bit. I'm very serious. Seriously. We have talked to the Attorney General's office. We've had a survey of what's being done across the state. And very few, there are some, but very few municipalities have stepped forward with it. I mean, it was a rubber stamp process. From the mandate from Governor Cuomo, it was just simply someone trying to check the boxes. But you haven't done that. You really took quite seriously the potential of what could be accomplished here. And I think that's why we're sitting here.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah.
I agree.
I would like to sort of thank you for the thank you and all the.
Thank you for the thank you.
And also add to that sort of a shout out to the city government, because this is not the only area where we are in the forefront, I think, of our climate action plan. So I think in really important ways, we are really modeling what a micropolis can do at the forefront of positive change. So in that sense, I'm very proud to be part of the government.
And I think it could be a model for the state.
So, the only thing I would ask Lester maybe to talk to the mayor about the mobile health piece, just, we don't want to duplicate services or anything like that, right? So, I think our action tonight is to accept this plan.
I don't think there's any,
No action? Are we
No
just
action.
discussing tonight?
it's presentation. yeah.
Just presentation?
Just presented, okay, because I was gonna ask a question about where we, because you had presented the 4 points and 4 things and then the accountability piece. And I didn't know if that was just year 1 and that's the only thing you were talking about, because this is, plan was more than a year 1, right?
It's 5 years.
Yes. So,
My recommendation will be that you identify some entity that oversees this process for the next 5 years. It could be an employee, a city government employee, or it could be an outside consulting firm that could do it for you. But we think that it is important that you have someone who is literally monitoring, managing, evaluating this process from beginning to end.
That's not you?
I know, that's.
It can't be.
It can't be if you want us to be. We don't want to presume
That's
that we're in it.
commercial with you, yeah, the guy says, yeah, we do it, and he goes, we don't actually do it.
Well, if you say yes, I think we're sitting here because we would be honored to.
Oh,
I think Lester's point is that there needs to be the institutional memory across the whole arc of this project, rather than these disparate pieces.
Right. Right. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to come in and talking to us about this tonight and all of the work that you've done. Rennie as well, thank you as well, because you also helped with this. So we appreciate it very much so.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Good to see everyone.
See you.
Give me a ring out or send me an email.
Good. Okay. All right, so we're gonna move to item number 2, amendment to council rules regarding virtual participation. And
Okay.
President Shout is going to school us on that.
Well,
I didn't put it that way, but maybe that's how I come across.
I was in school today.
Yeah, but I'm the student, not the teacher in it, so it's very different. Yeah, so when we adopted the local law about allowing virtual participation, the next step, according to the state law, is that we need to now put it in our rules, how we're going to have the process, because we can't, it's not the same as virtual participation, cannot be the same as what we did through COVID, when the executive order said we could participate virtually. And I know I have told you all extensively and often, the rules, as well as, court counsel. So we can't just, you have to have a reason to attend, not attend the meeting. You can't just be on vacation and say, I'm gonna Zoom in. You have to be able to tell, let the chair know, because the quorums do matter. Do you want me to go over all of that? I mean, I know you've gotten so many emails. Anybody want me to go over thank you. So you'll see on the agenda, I'm sure you're sick and tired of me saying, except I'm smiling when I'm saying it. You don't see that when I'm emailing. So I don't know if you saw the amendments that I wrote that's on the agenda. So that is what I'm proposing. Do you want me to read it out loud?
Yes.
Okay, so amendment to the council rules, rule 1, subsection 2. The rule 1, subsection 2, subsection B. In order to virtually participate in a meeting, council members shall seek permission from the chair with at least 72 hours notice. Permission needs to be requested through an email to the chair, the president of the council, and the city clerk. It must include the explanation complying with state law, which states virtual participation is allowed for extraordinary circumstances such as illness, caregiving responsibilities, or any other significant or unexpected factor or event which precludes the member's physical attendance at said meeting. If permission is not granted, the council member cannot be included in the vote unless they are physically present at the meeting. Questions?
Yeah, I do have one question. So I'm away on a business meeting. Is that qualify for, is that a significant factor or event? Which precludes-
I would not interpret it that way. I mean, there's that part, the extraordinary circumstances through factor or event, which actually all the way through physical attendance at such a meeting, that is the state law. That's not my wording. So that's, I guess, interpretation, and I don't know if Barbara Grace-Pollard wants to jump in. My interpretation is, yeah, Barbara, you want to jump in with that one?
Sure. So the question was whether or not a planned planned work trip would count as an extraordinary circumstance.
So as a significant. It's a significant or any other significant or unexpected factor or event which precludes physical attendance. So I say, I'm off doing business at something X in Philadelphia, won't be available. I planned it for 3 weeks. Can I attend remotely?
So my understanding is that the significant is tied to the unexpected nature of the event. So that the expectation is that public officers would organize their schedules to prioritize the physical presence at their public meeting.
Hear you. Good enough. It's not the answer I was hoping for, but it's the answer I accept.
To be clear, I don't think it's the answer that most of us think is the best answer under the open meetings law. As I've mentioned to Andrea multiple times, and I think others on the council, there's been some advocacy or talk of advocacy through NICOM to try to liberalize the remote participation rules because they seem unnecessarily draconian to a lot of us, but this is where things stand.
Thank you.
Michelle, sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you. So my impression of this law and then the local law that we had to pass is really like a medical accommodation for, yourself or your family member, because the state law states like this is to be in effect for 2 years, right? So, like in response to COVID. So if, say my child comes down with something and I am not able to give 72-hour notice, it sort of defeats the purpose of the accommodation because it's a medical situation, and having to disclose HIPAA protected information or information about your family sort of violates, I believe, the intent of what this is trying to accommodate. But I understand, why you need to have an idea of quorums, and it's like herding cats, right? But still, I think that having to
Michelle, I totally hear you, because a medical emergency pops up, but you can't do it, it's the definition of medical emergency, right? But in order to get the quorums, I didn't know how else to do it without a deadline, because how about if everybody has that and the meeting is just canceled? I don't know if there's a word that we could, I didn't know how to go about doing it without a deadline, because if we have to post the location, then that needs to be in advance, that has to be on the agenda in advance.
But when you're talking about posting the location, do you mean posting the location of the person who's participating remotely so that place can be opened up and count as a quorum?
Yeah, so we have 5 committee members, and 3 of them are in person and 2 of them had permission to participate remotely. They asked 72 hours in advance, and then one of the in-person members had a medical emergency and couldn't participate. It couldn't come in because they got COVID or their kid was sick. And now we don't have an in-person quorum, but we also didn't know to put the locations on. It kind of gives us we're in a pickle.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I mean, excuse me. since I'm actually out right now for a medical emergency. I hope you all can hear me okay. I think that you could achieve what you're trying to go for with a 24-hour time period. Because in 24 hours, if I understand about publishing in the Daily Freeman, that is our primary way of making location and time and scheduling information known. But, keeping it in mind the governor's open or transparency requirements, making things available 24 hours ahead, if you could update our website and then update the information, in all of our available places 24 hours ahead with the alternative participation location, that could also do the trick.
I would be absolutely fine with that as long as, if you could try and let us know 72 hours ahead of time or before. My only concern with that, maybe this is where Elisa could jump in, is if it's 24 hours, in our meetings at 6:30, Elisa, the day before at 6:30 might not be able to get that posted. So I just wanted to check in with Elisa if she's there.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as long as I take my laptop home every night with me from work. So I think all of you have my cell phone number. If you were to text me, that would be the best way. I could just hop on and post anything you needed to be posted.
Yeah, that's fine. If it's 24 hours and I could, they'll let whoever the chair is and myself know. And then of course I could tell you.
Yeah, that's no problem.
If it could be 72.
Yeah.
I don't think we should change the language in there.
Well, we would have to.
So-
We'd have to, because otherwise then we could never accept 24.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So I think, 20, if we change it to 24, which I would be fine with as long as folks understand how hard it is to coordinate all of this.
But you can also frame it, say with 72 hours, preferably 72 hours, but
Or-
absolutely more than 24.
Or at least 72 hours.
24 hours, right?
Yeah.
Well, that would be
At least
changing.
24 hours, but no more than 24,
No less.
no less than 24.
I'm totally for this, and I think it's pretty straightforward piece of drafting.
Yeah, oh yeah, I just jotted this down, I'm not, and I hear Michelle's concern, how if it happens 10 minutes before the meeting,
No, I think 24 hours is a great number.
Okay,
And it
so-
allows for getting COVID the day before, right? This doesn't.
Right, so I'm just gonna change it to shall seek permission from the chair with at least 24 hours notice. And just out of common courtesy, if you folks, if you could let us know sooner,
Please do.
please do, because there's some juggling to do with it. So I will change that word, or that number.
I'm planning to be sick in November, by the way.
Okay.
We'll get over that.
And then, is that all the discussion for
So
B?
negative.
Okay, so rule 1.2C, any council members participating virtually must remain on camera to ensure they are heard, seen, and identified while the meeting is being conducted, with the exception of executive sessions or attorney-client sessions. And rule 1.2D, the minutes of meetings involving video conferencing must include which, if any, members participated remotely. And I should have said C and D the state is requiring us to put these into our rules, basically, so. Good with C and D?
Yeah.
All right, so I will retype this. And change that one number, so when you write the resolution, do you want to?
Yeah, as amended,
Yeah, as amended, and then I'll get that to Elisa. And I'll just change the one number, okay.
Okay. Any more discussion? Yes.
I move that we accept this legislation as amended.
Any questions?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So the resolution
To adopt
the,
amendment to the council rules, but the rule 1, One,
Rule
two, B, C, and D. as
Yeah,
amended.
adding, so it's adding to rule 1 subsection 2, adding B, C, and D. As,
B,
but this will
C.
be attached to it.
One,
Thank you.
two, D. Say that again. 1, 2,
So
1,
the,
2. I have 1, 2, B, C.
so it's
AD.
rule 1 subsection 2, adding B, C, and D subsections.
Type this up for us. Okay, so resolution to adopt amendment to the council rules, rule 1, 2, B, C, and D, adding B, C, and D, is that how you say?
No, so. Brains racking on more visual stuff. Resolution to adopt amendment to the council rules by adding B, C, and D to rule 1. Subsection B. Did I say that right?
Subsection B, yeah. Subsection
Section 2.
2. Okay, all right. Resolution to adopt amendment to the council rules, adding to rule 1, subsection 2, B, C, and D.
As attached. So that clears everything up.
As attached. Okay, that motion was by Renee Scott Childers, seconded by Carl Frankel. All right.
Please, I'll probably get that to you tomorrow evening, realistically speaking.
Clear this language up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and while that's going around, thank you, Adrian. Let's move to number 3 on the agenda. Renee Scott Childress, this is memorializing resolution calling to repeal the Second Amendment. Have you all received the draft?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Renee, you want to talk to us about that?
Sure. So this is basically a resolution calling for the beginning of a conversation about the nature and effect of the Second Amendment. There has been a repeal of a federal constitutional amendment. So the 18th Amendment was repealed in the 1930s with the 21st Amendment that was relating to temperance, using the ban on alcoholic beverages in the United States. And my concern is that crime is usually something that's adjudicated at the local and state level. So, you know, the crime of murder, for example, is usually a state or local issue. It's not a federal crime per se. I mean, there are some specific instances where murder is a federal crime, but in general, crime is a local and state issue. And I think that the Second Amendment, there's a long history of discussion about it and what its true intent was. And a lot of that can get lost in, the historical breezes. And so I think given that a number of former justices have really ridiculed the concept of the current court's reading of the Second Amendment as providing an individual right to bear a firearm, I think that if we were able to start a conversation about the amendment itself, that this might really return our general discussion back to this question of how municipalities and states would like to regulate and think about these issues that have traditionally been the purview of the localities and the states. So what the resolution is calling for, it's a petition. It's asking our two representatives in the Senate, Schumer and Gillibrand, to introduce a resolution calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment to begin a conversation on what the real effect of this resolution has been in terms of the kind of crimes that we've seen perpetrated with a new generation of firearms over the last several decades.
Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
This is a tricky one for me, Brennan.
Well, this has to be questions first because there hasn't been a motion. So.
Oh, so there's no conversation, I just questions, no comments.
Yeah, so if you have questions about the resolution itself, that's what we can talk about.
So, okay,
But if we
so
want to have a discussion about.
I would like to have a discussion, but I'll wait on that, but I want to
Somebody
question that
needs
news.
to-
All right, so then can I have a motion to discuss?
Unless you have questions.
Well, that's what I asked, question.
I misunderstood, I did not understand the protocol.
Do we, okay, let's go backwards. Let's
Okay.
go back, take a step back. Are there any questions for Rennie? No.
I guess not.
All right, can I have a motion to discuss?
Mike,
Mike, second? All right. Discussion.
Now you can discuss.
you want to go?
You can go.
Thank you.
You put it more,
Thank you.
more eloquent. now.
Thank you, I think. So it's a really tricky one for me, because I think it goes without saying that our gun situation and the whole context of gun use and support is not only bad, it's scary, it's insane right now. We're kind of insane in our approach to it. Our national dialogue is nuts. So I agree with everything that's in the memorializing resolution, but I do not think it is the appropriate format to do it. And I don't think it's right for it to be on behalf of the city to do it. So in fact, I will vote against this unless the conversation persuades me otherwise for really two reasons. And I'm inviting your comments on this. Talk me out of it. I invite you. One is that I think it's going to subject us as a city, given the nature of a dialogue, to a lot of ridicule. And I don't think we need ridicule, and I don't think we need people coming into the city to make a point about how silly it is. I attended, I shouldn't say I attended, in the street, there was a party a year and a half ago or a year ago, and there were people with InfoWars t-shirts on, and it was just like chilling to me to see that. I do not want these people coming in with guns to make a point. So I think we should put in argument, and I also think as a practical matter, we're not going to repeal the Second Amendment. That's not the way to manage this ultimately. The solutions that we're looking for have been enormously ineffective, but I don't give up hope that some sort of gun control can happen. So between the combination of sort of putting a target on us for crazies out there and the ultimate uselessness of it, I would propose that I would ask if there are not other ways that you can start the same conversation without going through this channel.
In 1776, a number of people got together in Philadelphia, and they started talking about an idea that subjected them to an immense amount of ridicule. And that idea was that a series of colonies in the backwater of America could somehow become an independent country by separating from the colonial power that ruled over them. So I think this idea of subjecting us to ridicule, this is often the place where big ideas start. Well, and so, I mean, I thought about that too. I know we live in a very contentious, very powerful situation in which a lot of people go straight to calling for resignation, calling for physical violence, perpetrating physical violence. I'm very aware of that. I mean, I'm not happy about putting this forward for some of those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, as far as subjecting us to ridicule, I think the other way to say that is sometimes it takes courage to take a stand that may not be completely popular. Sometimes it takes courage to do something that even frightens you to do. But looking at the situation that we're in, you know, I'm thinking of recently, New York had a law struck down by the Supreme Court precisely based on the Second Amendment. And that law had been in effect for over a century. Now, that law was fairly sensible. So what did New York State have to do? Well, now New York State had to do an end run around the prescription, the new prescription of the Supreme Court. So what's going to happen? My fear is that now people who brought suit in the previous case will now bring suit against this one. And I would not be surprised if the current Supreme Court struck down our new law. So what do we have to do? We have to do another end run around that to try to appeal and try to get to the same place. So you end up with this whole legal game of strike down, end run, strike down, end run. And, you know, so that's why I think the crucial thing here is that for me, we're looking at developing a new approach by raising a new conversation. And that's the question, what is the best place to think about these issues of sensible gun regulation, the nature of crime, and how states and localities think about their specific communities?
Thank you for that. I just want to add one more thing. I am not at all opposed to putting yourself out on the line for something you believe in and subjecting yourself to ridicule. So this is not a general question. Never subject yourself to ridicule. When the cause is right, I'll go there, and I could talk about some causes that I would go there.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of them for me. I don't think it serves any real effective purpose in the gun control conversation ultimately. Sometimes it makes sense to invite the arrows. This isn't one of them.
Okay.
Michael?
So as a CCW holder, and for no one's familiar with an acronym, that means carry concealed weapon. So that means I legally, in the state of New York, can carry a firearm with me, except for areas that don't allow it. The federal law, yes, may state one thing, but it is up to the individual states to make their own sorts of rules and regulations for that. And that can even vary from county to county, depending on where you live. Nowhere in the state of New York can anyone walk into a store, pick up a handgun, and walk out of the store. It takes months to get this. Extensive checks, extensive background checks, references, meeting with judges, even more background checks when you actually get to select a firearm. And it is a process. It's not just something like this. And, you know, the ultimate thing is evil always finds a way. And, you know, you have knife violence, you have gun violence, you have car violence. There will always be a way. And, you know, I'm the utmost against this. And I don't want to, you know, this could be a 24-hour discussion if we got into it, but I'll just, you know, from the perspective of someone who does have a legally purchased firearm in the state of New York, it is not an easy go there, pick up a gun and start shooting people.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
I have to say, this is when I saw what you've written, I was very impressed. And I was like, wow. And at first I didn't know if you were serious, you know, I thought, oh my God, this is so weighty, you know? And hearing you, Carl, you know, it's making me think, it is challenging to pass it and say, and what would come this way from the community. And so I'm sitting here thinking about this, and it's just so much stirred up right now that it's like, oh, here's another thing, and another thing tonight that I felt like, oh my gosh, am I really prepared? Did I come prepared to really have discourse on it? You know, so I'm like, oh. So You know, I came in thinking, oh yeah, we're looking forward and we'll all do this, you know, and I was like, oh, here I am in the room and here's this resolution, so.
Well, the point of it is, as I said, is to start a conversation.
This can be just to start a conversation.
Yes, so one thing is we can vote to table it for a month, to allow folks more time to think about it, if that's the way to feel, or what other people would do, so.
Mhm.
First of all, it took gumption to publish this and write this, and so, you know, thank you for that, for your courage to do that. I'm kind of curious, because I agree with you on your second point, not so much your first point, but,
What was my
your
second
second point was you didn't think that this would actually,
What's the best approach?
Do it.
or not the best approach, but that actually was, maybe it was the third point that you said. One of your points in there was that you didn't think anything would actually happen. You know, this would go up and our senators wouldn't do anything. And I agree with you. I don't really see that, you know, them taking this battle up. Do you have any, since the door is open and we're starting a conversation, do you have any ideas on gun control issues? And I mean, I know we all have concerns.
Can we table that for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Be here all day. We could, it's such a weighty, conversation. I mean, I don't think that anyone in here can say that they're not for gun safety control and measures and things of that nature.
And the thing is, I mean, every time there's been a school shooting, I'm gonna start getting emotional and crying, like, they thought it would never be their time. And hope to God that we, you know, never are there, but every place that this has happened, they, I'm sure, have said, well, it won't happen here. And so having these conversations, I think as elected officials is just so important. I mean, I don't know what we could do. I was actually genuinely asking you because these thoughts run through my mind. I played piano for a lot of the schools. And a lot of this, you know, I went to Miller and Kingston High School and Crosby. And so when I was sitting there playing piano, I'm looking up at the signs near the doors of telling the kids what to do when this happens. And like, I didn't have to worry about that. You know, I was actually in school when Columbine happened, and it was just like mind-blowingly shocking that something like that would happen. And now it's just not, you know? So, I mean, I would love to just keep talking about it.
Absolutely, and we should.
Michelle had her
And
hand
we
up
should.
before, just to let you know.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna come to Michelle.
Mhm.
Yes.
Hi. Well, thank you for the time that you put into this, Rennie. I think these are all important discussions. But I think it would be maybe a good idea to pull in some other groups that maybe have been already working on things like the Sandy Hook parents, or Parents Against Guns, or bringing in so that we're not starting from scratch here. And I personally think that this is not really a good time for the discussion, and that we have a lot of division in our community right now that we need to be working on and bringing together. I mean, we just had, the presentation by Peaceful Guardians and those conversations that will be going on. And then I just feel like this is just taking us off on another exit and, left turn. And I do really appreciate the conviction behind it, because it was, the reversal on the concealed carry laws here in our state. It was a huge disappointment. But we also have community members that rely on being able to hunt to feed their families. And there's just a lot of pieces to this. So.
Sure. Well, I would just add, there's nothing in here that's talking about taking guns away from people. The question is, what's the best place for us to think about issues of crime? And, in terms of this question of effectiveness, you all may be familiar with, in physics, there's something called the butterfly effect. And this is the claim that the possibility of a butterfly flapping its wings in one part of the world and changing the weather in another part. And I'm thinking of Jason West. Jason West down in New Paltz illegally marry two gay people. And a lot of people say you're insane, it's not gonna do anything, and now we have, gay marriage is legal in the United States. So, I agree, I gotta say, I'm somewhat ambivalent about it myself, but I just feel like the way that we go about this, with this constant kind of give and take with the Supreme Court, is not the most effective way to think about our guns. I'm perfectly happy to put off later conversation, put this off till later, so people can think about it more. I like your idea, Michelle, of talking to some other groups, and maybe, establish like some kind of forum that we could have, where we could have a discussion about it with different groups of people involved, so that it is more of a community discussion. I think that's a great idea. So maybe
So
what we'll do is.
I'm gonna make the suggestion then that we not take it off the table, but that we table it.
Yeah.
To continue discussions.
Okay, and we have to have a vote on that.
I'm sorry?
If you're making a motion, the rule.
Well, I'm making a suggestion, so I want
You want to wait for what Carl says?
Yeah,
and
I
then
want to say very
somebody
quickly,
can make a
we just had a conversation about public safety, a great presentation. This folds into a program, a strategic initiative around public safety quite beautifully, it seems to me. So we've been handed a way to integrate a conversation in the community without doing this. So again, I'm all for the conversation. I'm not for using this as a vehicle to start.
Okay.
All right, so do I have a motion to table this discussion? Motion by Carl, second by Barbara.
And discussion is not allowed on the table.
So you just vote?
Yeah.
All in favor to table?
All in favor to table,
Tabling.
yes,
And then,
great.
do we want to think about what that weather means right over there?
Well, we're on our last item. We're on the last item.
Is it a tornado?
Sorry?
We got rain coming.
I was wondering, was
That's
that
the actual.
I think that you were excited, right?
What?
You were
Are
excited?
you excited?
About not-
Are we gonna be in a tornado together?
I was just excited for rain. Rains.
Andrea, do we need to do anything with Michelle taking over? Because I have to.
No, he's gotta go, so
Oh.
Michelle,
There's an.
I just, if you want to just announce that Michelle is now a voting member of the committee, because Michael Library is leaving, which I just.
I just did.
So,
Yeah.
is that okay, Michelle?
you are now Michael.
Well, Michelle, Michael.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Actually, my name only has one L, so it really is
Okay, so we're gonna move to, item agenda number 4, rent guidelines board recommendation, and I see, Bartek sitting over there in the corner, waiting so patiently, and been sitting here throughout this whole meeting. So everyone got the, applications, but before we discuss the applications, Andrea, why don't you, say what we discussed earlier?
All right, so I was going to, oh, thank you. I was good, I know you all have the applications, but there's a lot to sift through, and, after talking with court counsel, we both agreed that we would not say names. We would just use the numbers associated with them. And I was going to put it on the whiteboard. The problem with that, although actually the public member did leave, but now Michelle wouldn't be able to see it. But if you guys can just keep track, what I'll do is on the whiteboard, keep track of the numbers of like, okay, 1 to 5 are the tenants, although that's not actually accurate, but keep track of that. So then we just talk about each application as number 2, number 3. So we're not saying names.
So, are we limited to discussing solely what's in the application? Or are we allowed to bring in knowledge about people who've applied that is not in the application?
We would have to do that in executive session.
Because then I think we need to go into executive.
Just immediately go into executive
I think so.
session?
Yes.
I mean, how
It's
do
gonna
we,
get total, and we'll.
how do we police that
Let's get the
boundary?
number and then.
That makes my life easier, but that's not the reason why we should go into executive session. So let me just.
And that was the other question. I didn't know if this is
I was prepared for that too, so.
Yes.
personnel issues.
So for a public officers law 105, this would fall under identifying the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation or matters leading to the appointment That's the, where this is relevant, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person. This is permissible to go into executive session for this topic. So to enter into executive session, you would need to have a motion, a second, and a vote.
Right.
That I just said the reason for executive session.
Okay, but prior to doing so, because Bartek has been sitting here,
You could include Bart
we would have to
in the
agree
executive session.
We
If you-
invite him, right?
You could invite him in to say, yes.
How do you feel about that? Yes,
And
Okay.
is a verbal invitation okay, or do you require it engraved, or?
okay. So we need a motion to go into executive session. Motion by
Motion to
Barbara,
go
second
into
by Rebecca
executive session.
Childress. All
For
in
the
favor?
reasons that Andrea stated.
For the reasons that Andrea stated, and we are also inviting Bartek Stardak. So we're just going to get the number to call into, and just make sure that your video is turned off and your sound is off.
Michelle and Barbara, do you still have the number?
I don't have the number.
Okay.
I'd have to search it for it.
All right, I'm already halfway there, I hope.
We usually use Mike's phone
Well,
to put on the table.
you can use mine if you like.
Where is it? Lisa, do you have the number? Quick access?
Is this the number that we always use?
Yeah.
Yes, I'll text it to you, Andrea.
Okay, thank you. And then Michelle and Barbara, I'll text it to you.
Well, to be clear, that's not the only person you guys have discussed who has threatened us, or actually is a current petitioner in a lawsuit. Wait, how is that on Zoom?
Yeah, I was a kid. This
Thank you,
level
Barbara.
did it.
Thank you.
After midnight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Oh,
Thank you, Barbara.
Barbara, talk, please.
Oh, that's nice.
The elevator. Thank you. Right, charger? Okay, so we are back in session, back in our Laws and Rules Committee. And we are on our last item.
No, we're not.
That's old business.
No, I added a late communication.
Okay, so we're on item number 4, the RIT Guideline Board recommendation. And we have chosen our list for the RIT Guidelines Board. And so I am going to ask for a motion to adopt the RIT Guideline Board recommendation. And then after that, we will say the names.
You have to actually read the resolution
With the names.
with the names and then. And just, if I may, Rita,
Yep, you may.
for whoever's listening, thank you all for applying. It was, as you could tell from the long executive session, there was a good conversation had and we had hard decisions to make. So
Yep.
it is.
It's technically I'm breaking our new rule, right?
I also want to thank everybody that applied because I was really blown away by the time and attention people took to apply and.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think in total, I think we had a total of 27 applicants.
Applications, pretty
So
well
that's
spread,
awesome.
balanced though.
So thank you very much.
Categories.
Inspiring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to read the resolution. Resolution of Common Council of the City of Kingston, New York, recommended 9 members for appointment by the Commissioner of Housing and Community Renewal to the City of Kingston Rent Guideline Board. And I'll also read the names for each category. Yes?
Yes.
All right, so for the Rent Guidelines Board, we have selected the following. As tenants, Michael Tierney, Carolina Soto. Our alternate is Terry Callow Gomez. And forgive me if I butcher some of the names. As public members, we have selected Charles Sanchez, Diana Lopez Martinez, Noah Kipley Ogman, Mai Inouye, and Michael Brown. And our alternate is Stephanie Sickler. For our property owners, we have selected Tara Perry, Anthony Tampone, and an alternate, James Lamb Jr. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to accept. Motion by Michelle Hirsch, second by Rennie Scott Childress. Any question? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposers? No, so moved. So thank you guys for the due diligence of the Laws and Rules Committee for the tedious process of choosing all of these people. I think we have a well-rounded RIT Guidelines Board. And thank you to those applicants that applied.
And also thank you to the council for being so well prepared, because this is a quick turnaround, and of course, Bartok and Summer for
Yeah.
all that too.
Okay, fantastic. All right.
So are we dealing with the ashes issue?
I think, Elisa, are you still here? I did get an email, I don't know.
I'm here.
Was it sent to everybody?
Yes.
There's actually,
Well, why don't we, before we go to the ashes, that's under old business, can we deal with item, agenda number 5, which is the standard work week? That was a late
Oh,
communication.
right, yeah.
yeah, that's from me as well.
Okay, so go ahead, Elisa.
So I apologize. There was a change in the form that had to be filled out this year, and I had left one of the boxes blank and didn't realize it, and the state kicked it back. So we have to just pass the resolution again, and I apologize.
Does anybody need to do anything?
No, I need to check the box and send it back. But the
Do I-
state will not accept it the way it is.
On it, need to recuse themselves?
Yeah,
So I'm on there, right? I just don't. I'm recusing myself. Thank you.
All right, so I'm gonna read the,
Oh, you're good.
to adopt the standard workday for elected officials.
Move to
Motion.
adopt that legislation.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Did you hear that Michelle recused herself?
Okay. Thank you, Elisa. Then we can move on to
Thank
the old business, and that is also you.
yes. So I was not here last month when you first discussed the scattering of the ashes. My understanding is that you tabled it.
Yes.
I did forward an email from Lindsay that I got this afternoon, which gave her opinion on what she thought should happen. I don't know if everyone got to see that.
I didn't see that. But I can pull it up if you forwarded it. I keep saying 18th, today's the 17th. Go ahead, Elisa.
So I don't know where you want me to start off with this. As you know, my office deals with all the death certificates. So it has been brought to our attention that people do scatter ashes in our city parks, and we don't have any legislation. And after speaking with Lindsay, she felt that there should be, at the very least, notification and coordination with the Parks Department, because there are times, quite often, where people rent the park for family events, such as kids' parties, and you don't necessarily want someone to be there scattering ashes when you have something going on. And at the same time, it's a very sacred event when somebody is scattering ashes. So Lindsay just felt that there needed to be some communication and possibly a permit process and designated areas of the park where that would happen.
Okay. Any questions for Elisa? No? Everybody okay with this? All right, so we, Elisa, did you give me a committee report for that?
I didn't, because I didn't know. I know Barbara had spoken as well last month about this. So did you want me to get together with Corporation Counsel and Lindsay and come back next month with something more concrete so that there are designated areas?
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
And so we'll hold off on this until next month. Okay?
Great.
Okay, great. I think that's it. Is that all of the agenda items?
Yeah.
All right, so, motion, I'm sorry, Michelle, yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you guys could just announce the information for the special meeting next week.
Yes.
Council to vote on the.
Thank you. We will be holding a special council meeting to vote for the ETPA or the rent guideline board selections that was passed tonight. That council meeting is Wednesday, August 24th at 7:30 p.m. It will be a virtual, although council members please be here, unless you told me otherwise. So in chambers and on Zoom.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your patience and
And good.